You go into the first day of high school, or you go into the first day of your job, or you go into a conference, or you go into a networking event, and you think, how can I like everyone in this room? Yeah. Not, how can everyone in this room like me?
Welcome.
Vanessa, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited.
Yes.
Do I seem awkward?
In this moment, yes, but not a minute ago.
Yeah, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
I get a little nervous whenever I'm speaking to people like you that know body language, what nervous looks like. And I'm just trying to not look nervous.
But I'm also a recovering awkward person.
That's what I love.
I have both, right? So I see awkward and I love awkward because that's also me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So don't worry, just embrace that awkwardness.
Good. Okay, I'm going to relax.
That was a label I used to reject and fear, and then I realized it was actually a great gift of freedom.
Yeah. I will say, and your book helped me a lot. I would say that I also used to be much more awkward.
Okay.
Also, when I started this podcast, sorry to the listener, I've told this story a few times, I thought this will be so easy. You just sit down with someone, you chat, you go about an hour, all good. When I sat down and started sitting with someone and I have to drive this thing and it's only 5 minutes and I have to figure out how we go. And I started panicking and having mini panic attacks, and it was obviously affecting the quality of the podcast and all the different stuff. So
also, it's contagious.
Yeah.
By the way, if you my favorite study. I don't know. Can I talk about a study?
Yeah.
So this study, in a way, it terrified me and paralyzed me, but it also freed me. So it was a study that looked at fear. Mm-hmm. And so what the researchers did, very clever, is they had people wear sweat pads, pads underneath their armpits, run on the treadmill. Uh-huh. So the pads gathered sweat. Yeah. And then group 2, they had them skydive for the first time.
Yep.
Also wearing the sweat pads, right? And then they had people go into an MRI machine and smell the sweat pads. Gross, I know.
I would hate to be that group in this study.
By the way, if you're ever paid, if you ever did this in college, where you're $12 to electrocute myself. Yeah. It's way worse than you think, always. Yeah. So they smelled these sweat pads. They had no idea what they were smelling, but the people who smelled the skydiving pads caught the fear. Their own fear regions in their brain lit up.
Wow.
That was a game changer for me, because what I used to believe is fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Right? I would think, oh, I'm afraid, I'm anxious, I'm awkward, I feel like I do not belong, but just plaster on a smile, grab your cocktail, and walk in there.
Yeah.
But what I realized was I was so afraid underneath it that that's why I wasn't making friends. That's why I wasn't making business contacts, because I literally reeked of that fear, and people were catching it from me.
Yeah.
And so you working on your own awkwardness is almost a gift to your listener to not catch it.
Yeah. Yeah, damn it, that's true. You give me so much hope in 2 minutes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
we're done.
We're done.
Bye.
All right, guys, so thank you. Tune back in next week. Okay, so here's my dummy questions. Number 1, what do you call what you do?
Yeah. I call what I do a behavioral investigator, but that's subject to change, of course.
Yeah.
Just because I've gone through a lot of different variations of the title. It's either author or behavioral investigator, because people seem to get right away, you look at human behavior. And that's it. That's all I do.
That's great. And then what was your journey? You said you used to be awkward.
I am. I'm in recovery. I have moments,
And when I will say, you are exactly how, how they say don't meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Right? You are exactly how I would hope that you would be. So when you came walking in the office, you were just bright and shining, and you just, so how.
Well, I am in silk too. That helps.
Yeah, it does help. But how do you become this? How do you go from being awkward to now having a career teaching people essentially how not to be?
Yeah. First of all, it's amazing that I can make a career out of teaching people how to not be awkward.
Yeah.
So I think that the biggest problem I had growing up, I was always a self-development junkie. I read every Dale Carnegie. I read them all, right?
Yep.
The problem is that most people skills books or courses, or at that time there wasn't podcasts, but helpful learning, were written by extroverts. Because the way that it used to be was, I'm an extrovert, I'm naturally good with people, I'm naturally charismatic, therefore I should teach. Right? Those people are always told, you should write a book about how good you are. So here's what happened. You have an extrovert who sits down and pens a book about how good they are with people. The problem is they can then only teach other naturals. Because they're honing an existing strength. And so I would read book after book, I would watch course after course, and I was like, if one more person tells me to just be myself, If one more person just tells me to smile more, it wasn't working for me. And so I realized that the gap in the market was what I had to create, which was a people skills book written by a not people skills person.
Yeah.
And the only way that I could do that was to try to create systems for myself.
Yeah.
And so I did not come up with this idea. I wish I could take credit for it, but actually it was one of my professors in college. I went to Emory University, and there was a paper we had to write. It was a group paper. Nightmare. Right? Just nightmare.
Yeah.
And it was like every person in the group had to write 5 pages. And I said to him, I was like, I will write double the amount of pages if you will let me work on this by myself. Wow. And he goes, Vanessa, this paper is not about the writing skills. It's about the people skills.
Uh-huh. And you're like,
I was like,
shit.
No.
My worst favorite kind of paper.
Yeah. And I was like, but I don't got those. I don't have any people skills. And he said, Vanessa, here's what I want you to do. I want you to study people like you study for math or science.
Yeah.
I want you to study people and conversation and relationships just like you study for math or science.
Yeah.
And that was a huge light bulb moment for me because I thought, well, I can do that, right? I can look for patterns. So that's when I started doing the really nerdy things. Writing flashcards with conversation starters on them, tracking my interactions, paying attention to which color worked best, looking at other people's interactions or conversations and trying to find the patterns and similarities. Creating, no joke, I have a whole binder called Conversation Blueprints, which was just me listening to hours of conversation, especially loved talk shows because they always had these great conversations, and tracking the patterns. And that became a business. I mean, it wasn't that magical, but if you want to end
but thank God that that's even possible. You know what I mean? Especially now, like I would imagine in the age of social media and podcasts and all this stuff, like there's endless places to get this message out. I mean, you said that whenever you come to LA, it's just constant one after another.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool that you even have the ability to do that.
Well, it seems like the way that we were able to build a business is splitting up our business into 2 sides. So there's a B2C side and there's a B2B side.
Yep.
So our business to consumer side is very simple. We have a massive YouTube channel. We get some advertising dollars. Cool.
Yeah.
We also sell books and courses.
Yep.
On the B2B side, there's also this really big need, and this is where a lot of our revenue comes from, with 2 things. One, if you're brilliant in corporate world today, you're talented, you're smart, you're killing it.
Yeah.
You do your job exceptionally well. And then what happens? You're asked to become a manager.
Yeah.
And that is all people skills. Suddenly, for the first time in your career, you're not doing any of the things that you were technically trained in.
Yeah.
You're not graphic design anymore, you're not engineer. And so you're a manager and you have to fire people, have performance reviews, hire, negotiate with HR, have one-on-ones. We've never been taught that. And so that's a huge need in business where people will say, I have this new group of managers. And the second group is people who know that people skills grease the wheels, right? Like people skills are the ultimate social lubricant. They just make everything easier. And so thank goodness that's been a big need that pays.
Yeah, it blew my mind it took me years. When I started a company, so I started a business at 22, but I had great business partners and a lot of help and all that stuff. When I really started stepping into the leadership role, I think it took me years that were wasted of not accepting that people skills were 90% of my job.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a lot of time, like I said, unfortunately, that I spent saying I shouldn't have to do this and this shouldn't be how it works and this shouldn't. Had I talked to a few more people, I would have learned that that's just normal. But it blew my mind, and I wish that I had learned those skills much earlier. And I still am very much trying to learn them. But I would say that's also the thing, even for my listener. If you're not currently in a leadership role, learning these skills now will help you get there faster.
100%.
Yeah.
I think of it like a career shortcut. And I have seen this over and over again where people will jump the line or they jump the ladder when they have that special relationship or that special rapport or they have a client that says, I am only working with that person because I love working with them so much, and you climb with them.
Yeah.
And so you're not alone. I find that there's kind of 2 groups of people who I like to reach out to who are sort of like my soul students, right? Like they're the students that we just like mesh so well. One are what I called adventurous introverts.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, I think introverts get the same kind of category over and over again, where you can still be very adventurous as an introvert. You can be very socially adventurous even as an introvert. So that's a big group of people where they want to still maintain their boundaries. They want to be able to speak without being loud.
Yeah.
That's a very specific people skill.
Yeah.
How can I make my ideas heard without being the loudest person in the room?
Yeah.
That is a specific skill.
Big time.
So the other group is our goal-oriented entrepreneurs or extroverts.
Yeah.
Very similar to what you just said. They are killing it. And they get into these roles. They're negotiating for the first time, right? They're raising money. They're pitching VCs. They're leading a team. Yeah. They're speaking on camera. They're doing media. And they're like, I'm super goal-oriented, but I have no idea how to do this well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was me. That is me. How do you view introverts and extroverts? Like, do you view, and this is just a completely random, because I've given this some thought and I don't have my answer yet, but is it something that you're kind of stuck into? Is it a scale? Can an introvert become an extrovert? Because I'll tell you one thing that I really related to a lot when I was much more introverted was I wanted to be an extrovert. I saw the people that I looked up to and the people that I saw doing what I want to do in life and getting what I wanted out of life were mainly extroverts. And so I kind of felt like, am I stuck here forever?
Yeah.
How do you view it?
Yes. Okay. So I'm so glad you asked this question because I felt very trapped by the question, are you an introvert or extrovert?
Yeah.
Right? Like you're sometimes asked that as a young person or like on job interviews. So once I discovered this research, it was kind of a game changer, which is basically that extroversion is one of 5 main personality traits.
Got it.
So when it comes to personality science, I know we talk about Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and DISC and all those things. The only one that's backed in real science that's used by academics is called the Big 5.
Yeah.
And extroversion is one of those 5. What's interesting about extroversion is it's actually a scale, and there's something in between. A very small portion of the population is an introvert, and a very small portion of the population is an extrovert. Yeah. Most people are ambiverts.
Got it.
And when I heard that word, I was like, ha, like angels singing, right? I was like, ambivert. So an ambivert, I think this is probably both you and I.
Yeah.
Ambiverts are people who can dial up or dial down depending on their needs. Yeah. So yes, in the right day, at the right time, with the right people, they can dial up into extroversion and be out there and tell funny stories and be witty and public speak. Yeah. On other days when they need to really be introspective or they really want to be contemplative, they can dial down an introversion and go days without having any social interaction. Yeah. The key for ambiverts is knowing your triggers.
Yeah.
And this is the really hard part. So extroverts, they can always be on. They don't have to worry about this. Yeah. Introverts have to worry about when they have to dial up enough to get through the social parts of their job or their life. Yeah. Ambiverts can be triggered by toxic people, toxic places, and toxic ideas.
Okay.
So you might have a person in your life that just drives you crazy.
Yeah, you have a few of them.
Yeah. I know. And like, if you think of that person, you're like, yes, I know what that person is. Yes. So a toxic person is someone who triggers you to be your worst self. They trigger you to say things you didn't mean. Yeah. They either cause you to shut down or drama up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, depending on which way you go. Toxic places are places that you do not thrive in. So for example, I talk about this a lot in the book. I do not do well in loud bars or loud nightclubs.
Yeah. Still.
Yeah. So I know that is a trigger for me. I know that I just become very unfun.
Yeah.
And that's because my way of bonding is like deep, intimate conversations. Well, in a nightclub, you can't be like, so, what's your biggest fear? Like you can't yell that over the music.
Yes.
And the last one is toxic ideas. And this is the hardest concept. But especially in this day and age with politics and all the issues that come up, there are certain topics that come up and people just become violent or angry. And so we got to know our triggers. We have to know our triggers.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And how do you find your triggers? Like if I'm listening right now, I just kind of start to do some digging into like.
So it's exactly actually what I did back in those college days when it was like paying attention to patterns. Yeah. So if you're a journaler, even if you're not, take out a note in your phone and think to yourself, what were the last 5 bad interactions I had? Yeah. Were there any patterns? Was any of them caused by a trigger? Was it a place, a person, or an idea that came up? Yep. Think of the last 5 times you said something that you did not mean.
Yep.
right? Was it a person, place, or idea that you didn't like?
Yeah.
Think of the last 5 times where you felt like you weren't your best self, right? Ask yourself variations of that question until you come up with at least one person, one topic, and one place.
Yep.
That's your patterns. That's pattern finding.
And then do I avoid those, or how do I know the difference of, because some of my greatest progress has been figuring out what to avoid and figuring out what to learn to overcome.
So this is your choice. And I think this is our great choice in life, right?
Yeah.
So not to get like too deep here, but I think that we have a choice to either live in kind of ignorant bliss, where you're like, get rid of all discomfort, get rid of all challenges, don't talk about anything challenging, only be around unicorns and rainbows all the time. That is absolutely your right to choose a life where you're searching for that kind of bliss.
Yeah.
You also can have a life of what I call hard truth. Yeah. Some truths are hard. And so you can decide, you know what, that toxic person, that person is someone who's going to teach me about myself. Yeah. They're going to teach me be a better people person, or they're going to teach me about boundaries and how to say no. Especially, by the way, this question might be answered for you if your toxic person is a family member or a boss.
Yeah, that's probably very common.
Very common.
Especially like when you throw in, once again, I don't want to get political, but I think that currently a certain family member with a certain political idea might just be like a trigger nuclear missile. You know, we hear these stories of like Thanksgiving dinner has been ruined.
So you have a choice. You can either decide that you're not doing that for Thanksgiving dinner anymore. Yeah. Right? You're just doing something different, and that's totally fine. Or you can decide this is the person who's going to teach me how to hear differences. Yeah. How to hear and discuss and maybe not accept, but at least live with differences and find love for them in some other way. Yeah. That's your choice if you decide to do that. I will say that I think the latter breeds deeper happiness. Yeah. I'm speaking to myself when I say this. I tend to seek out comfort. Yeah. But I think that can get really, really boring.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. I obviously will naturally go to comfort, but I learned, and now that I've learned it, it seems to happen so quickly. Mm-hmm. When I'm in it, I'm miserable. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like the feeling of like this morning, I started boxing. And this morning, leaving boxing, just being so sweaty, so drained mentally. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm exhausted. And it is the best feeling in the world.
Totally.
But man, will I stay on that couch. You know what I mean? Yes. Like I will do it. And
then you hate yourself when you're like, why do I keep staying on this couch?
Almost instantly. And I at 32 years old, I still will make that mistake, and I still will instantly feel it, and I'll be like, oh gosh, you're a loser. And you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I've just become fascinated by that. Like, I think step one is definitely learning those things about yourself, and then how you're going to deal with them. Yeah. And I like how you put that you have these two choices and choose at your own.
And it can be different every year.
Yeah.
Like, don't set up a rule for yourself that's going to be hard for you to follow.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Don't be like, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
Like, unless you really, really mean it, be like, I'm not doing that next year.
Yeah.
I'm giving myself a Thanksgiving break. Yeah. Maybe the next year I'll have the strength to be able to face them.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have, different political climate then. Yeah. Let's hope.
What do you think? This is kind of a big question, not exactly in your thing, but I'm just curious, like when you see, as a very smart person who's done all this research, you see how crazy the world seems right now, but especially we'll talk about our country. Is there any like one big thing that you think is being missed?
Yeah, I do. I actually don't think it's that crazy. I think it's really predictable.
Yeah, what do you think?
So I was pretty sure that we were going to have our president years ago.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because of the way we work. Mm-hmm. So there's a wonderful book. It's called The Political Brain. It's an old book. And basically we know this. We know how people vote. We know how people think about issues. And it's actually quite predictable where we're at. There's also a really fascinating resource. I'm happy to send both of these resources to you. It's a really great article called The Cyclical History of Men. Uh-huh. And basically what these historians did is they looked at cycles in history. And they found that history absolutely repeats itself, not necessarily in events, but in generations. Yeah. So for example, millennials are the silent generation. So there was the silent generation, or those are the people of World War I and World War II. Yeah. That's us, millennials. Yeah. So then there's a silent generation, then there's boomers, then there's Xers, then there's millennials, and there's Gen Z. Yeah. Those are the generations, and they repeat. So my daughter will be the next boomer.
Yeah.
So if you look at the way that boomers, I'll take boomers for an example. So boomers had to face a stark choice in the 60s and 70s. They decide to either be a hippie or a straight edge.
Yeah.
That is actually that's a repeatable pattern of that generation. My daughter will probably also have the choice to be a liberal hippie dippy or a straight edge, whatever that means in 15 years.
Yeah.
And so actually we're in the cycle right now.
Yeah.
The historians predicted exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's that surprising.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, you're right. Okay, here's another question about you is because for me, learning, I think the first step for me was learning that some of these things that can really be so terrorizing on your mind, like your awkwardness or your, like, oh, I'm just an introvert and and I want all of these things out of life, but I'm never going to get them because I'm whatever. So first learning that they were changeable was really big for me.
Yeah.
Then actually seeing the change was like, holy cow.
Did you have a specific instance where you saw your own change and the benefits of it?
Man, I could probably, I think the way that it was for me, the way that I'm thinking of it right now is I more just sort of gradually got into these situations where like I would have times where I would go to dinner with a group of friends that were pretty close, but not my core group.
Yeah.
And I would feel so uncomfortable at that dinner. And there would be a lot of times when I would like not eat a lot of food because I'm a little anxious and I'm a little, it's just kind of whatever. Totally. I always want to be on guard. Yeah. And that was just my normal. And I can think to exact events when that happened. And then there just started to get into this time when I wasn't that way. And I would catch myself actually just enjoying myself. And I would catch myself, you know what I mean? And I think getting into that phase and learning like, oh my gosh, I really fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
And that was that right there is the core of why I do this podcast, why I read, why I do all that stuff. My question for you is, do you remember that for yourself? Do you remember you dive into all this research? Do you remember when it started really clicking for you and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a different person?
Yeah. Yeah, there was actually a really weird moment where I think it was actually a slow change, but this moment I think marked the change in a big way. In the early part of my career, I was pitching a different business and I was meeting with all these different VIPs in the industry. And so I met with this VIP. It was a very big deal coffee for me. I was super anxious. I was like, this has to go well, this has to go well. And it was supposed to be, I think, a 30-minute meeting and it was like 11 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I had not even like taken a drink of my latte yet. And he was like, well, nice to meet you, bye. And I was like, okay.
Gosh.
Yeah, horrible. It went horribly. And I was so embarrassed and I was so devastated. And then I kind of got into my people skills. I started working on people skills. I started writing about people skills. And I had another opportunity to pitch the same VIP. Now, this time he was on a panel. It was a little bit different. But he was on a panel and it was like a pitch competition. And I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. This guy knows me.
Yeah.
He's literally heard this pitch before. My pitch did not change all that much. It was almost the exact same slide deck.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm in such trouble. Like, he's going to poison the well. He's going to tell all the other panelists that I'm boring and horrible and my business sucks, right?
Yeah.
And so I get on stage. I do my thing. I'm like, just like pitch to the other people, hope they can convince him. And at the end of this pitch competition, he comes up to me. He was like, well, it's such a pleasure to meet you. That was a wonderful pitch.
Yeah.
And I was like, we've met before.
Did you say that?
Yeah. And he was like, we did? I was like, yeah, like not that long ago at so-and-so coffee shop. He was like, I mean, his face was as if I was a different person. Yeah. And that was the moment where I realized it's almost as if I'm a different person. The nice part about it was I didn't feel like I was being inauthentic on stage.
Yeah.
Actually, I felt less fake it till you make it on that stage than I did at that coffee meeting before.
Yeah.
And I realized that's something important. When you feel like you can be memorable and captivating and charismatic and still you are being you.
Yep.
Like that is the goal.
Big time. And that's the one point that I wish every listener or anyone that comes across this topic could understand. Because I think that like when you read, how to win friends and influence people, and you read, I think a lot of people judge it instantly.
Oh, yeah.
With like, oh, so you want to just teach me how to manipulate people?
Yes.
Well, that's not real. That's, okay, so now I'm going to be a manipulator.
Yeah.
And it's not that at all. And I think that when you just put it perfectly is when you're doing that and actually feeling more authentic.
Yeah.
It's just so important.
Well, so there's I think that like by the way, I face this challenge weekly in my business and my personal life, right? Like this is not a challenge that you're done with, right? This happens every time you interact with a new person, every time you're on a podcast. You have the choice to either show up and say, I'm going to try to be impressive.
Yeah.
Killer of charisma, by the way, or I'm going to show up and try to be me. And I have that choice on every podcast. Some podcasts I don't do well.
Yeah.
I try too hard. I'm too nervous. I'm too awkward, whatever. Yeah. And this happened really distinctly where I submitted the first round of my book to Penguin Random House. Mm-hmm. And in the very first chapter, I was trying to be impressive. Uh-huh. And that is because I feel like why would anyone learn people skills from me? Yeah. I'm a recovering awkward person. Yeah. Like I had total... phrase we hear all the time, total imposter syndrome. Yep. Where I was like, why would anyone read this book? Why learn from me? Why am I even writing this book? And so I submitted it to my editor, Nikki Papadopoulos, amazing at Penguin Random House. And she was like, Vanessa, this intro doesn't sound like you.
Wow.
And it's true because I trotted out like all these statistics about people skills. And I was like, science, research. That's my comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't. It was totally dry and very scientific, and I was trying way too hard to sound important or like I knew the research. Yep. And she was like, what is the thing you are most afraid of people finding out? And I was like, that I am awkward.
Yeah.
And by the way, the book came out before I had embraced my awkward badge. Okay, that was not anywhere.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm afraid of people thinking I'm awkward. Like, how can an awkward person teach people skills? I'm like, I think every person who ever has interviewed me and it went horribly are going to pick up this book and be like, what? How could she be writing a book about this?
Yeah.
She's like, that's exactly what you should write about in the introduction.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And so on like a moment of like acid, I don't even know what I was thinking, I decided to make the opening line of the book, hi, my name is Vanessa. I'm a recovering awkward person.
Yeah.
And I think that is why the book hit the bestseller list.
Yeah.
Like, I am sure of it. And that's how I opened my TED Talk, and it's changed my game.
Yeah, you're right. It's so, you can just hear it. When you hear the difference, it's so much more inviting or,
real.
What's this about?
Like,
yeah,
real.
Yeah.
And also, like, it doesn't, I heard the other day someone talk about how we've gotten into this idea of like promise everything, like promise the world.
Yeah.
So like, I think a lot about marketing and headlines, and not that we can have to talk about the business side of things, but on my website, it's like, I want to make big promises like change your people skills forever.
Yeah.
Or get anything you want, anytime, with anyone, everywhere, right? Like we're in like that right now where we're promising the world. And I think sometimes it's actually better to like just say what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that instead of me opening my book with, this book will change your life forever, which is great, but you immediately invite the other person to then challenge it.
Yep. Big time. And you talk in the book about that perfection is not only impossible, but really boring.
It's so boring.
And I think that's so cool. Like talking about how perfection is so boring, and what people actually gravitate towards is your vulnerability and is your weakness, is just, fascinating. But I think what that does for an awkward person or an introvert or actually just about anyone is says, gosh, the thing I've been trying to hide so hard is actually the key to what I've been looking for. And it seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But how do we do that? What does that look like?
I think that, not to get into too much of Brene Brown's territory, because she does it exceptionally well.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah.
Is small vulnerability. So what I mean by that is, and I've gotten into this trap before, I've done whole workshops and whole seminars where I teach about being real and being vulnerable and how to do that. And then like I have people come up to me and they'll be like, I've been in therapy for 20 years. And I'm like, okay, whoa, wait a second, right? Like when I say bring up your vulnerability, I don't mean verbally vomit on everyone you meet, right? Like that's not what I mean. What I actually mean is small vulnerability.
Yeah.
So for example, if I am uncomfortable at a birthday party because I don't know anyone, I will most likely walk up to someone and be like, hey, I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know anyone. So can I meet you? Can I stand with you?
Yeah.
I have had the most positive responses to that because it's a small vulnerability. It's true. It's small. Instead of me being like walking up and saying like, hey, so how's that chicken samosa? Like that works. If that works for you, cool. But I am reeking of awkwardness, right? The moment I tell people, like, I will walk up to big groups at like networking events or conferences and be like, you guys look like you're having a lot of fun. Can I just join your fun?
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the response I get from that.
Yeah.
Because honest.
Yeah.
So small. Just like baby vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Little ones.
Yeah, it's so good. I think that was such a good thing to hear was that, like I said, it's that everything that you're trying to hide is the key to everything you want, essentially. But learning how to do that. How do people learn, like, okay, so here's another thing. You listen to this podcast, you read the book, you're like, gosh, I'm armed with all of these tools.
Yeah.
And then you get out to that restaurant or that thing and you're like, holy shit. Like, this is, wasn't ready for this.
Yes.
How do you put that first toe in the water and start to actually apply what you're hearing?
Okay. Thank you so much for asking this question.
Yeah.
So the biggest failure that some of our students have is they trot our work and tips out to a really important event for the first time. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why would you start there? They're like, so I tried the conversation starter I've never tried before with my boss and it didn't go well. And I'm like, well, have you ever asked that conversation before? Yeah. Like, do you even have your own answer to that question before? So what I like to think of as low pressure practice.
Yep.
And this is really important. I also like to start with things in writing. It is so much harder to verbalize new skills when you've barely internalized them.
Yep.
So I would actually say start on email, right? Email is the very first place to try new things because you can think about it for a long time, right?
Yeah.
You can build it up. You can really think, you can really like edit it. You can ask someone else, hey, does this sound right to you?
Yeah.
That's first. Nail it on email. Be the most charismatic person on email.
Yeah.
Then do Slack.
Oof.
Right?
Yeah.
Then Slack.
Bumping it up.
Then GChat.
Yeah.
Then Messenger, right? Like that's a little more instant, right? So you have to work a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
But if you're like, I need a break, you could just be like, BRB bathroom, right? Like you can always do that if you need to. Then chat and then like be the most charismatic person on Slack ever.
Yeah.
Ever, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe a dating app.
Yeah.
Right. That's when the stakes go a little higher, right?
Yeah.
Be like great at messaging on dating apps.
Yeah.
Right. And then phone calls.
Yeah.
And it is phone calls because facial expressions, body language, nonverbal, that we teach a lot about body language in our courses. If you're trying to do all of our verbal tactics and our nonverbal tactics at the same time, it's too much cog load. Like it's just too much. And then finally, when you're ready in person, but not with your boss.
Yeah.
Not with someone who makes you nervous, not with your crush, with like your best friend and telling them, hey, I read this great book called Captivate. I'm going to try out some things. We're just going to see how it goes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like your mom. Your mom is so excited to practice the things you read in Captivate.
Yeah.
She will be so excited when you're like, Mom, can I try out some stuff on you? She'll be like, yes, darling. Yes,
Oh,
you
look
can.
at you.
Gosh, we just made your mom's day.
Yeah, big time.
And then your boss, your colleagues, your date.
You know what else I think is so good and once again has a lot of negative early response to it is looking at this stuff like building a skill. Because it is a skill. And a lot of times we look at, just the other day I interviewed a psychiatrist that does brain scans and
My favorite.
he's one of the only guys using actual scans to then treat. If you have depression, maybe it was from this. Let's actually look at the organ that we're treating. Right?
Amazing.
And so the way it felt is like, gosh, the way you're addressing mental health is you're kind of breaking down all of these bad stereotypes and how people judge it. That's kind of how this feels in the sense of we'll sit in our bedrooms and we'll look out at the world and we'll say, gosh, look at him, look at her. They're so charismatic. Everyone loves them. They have everything. If only I could be like that. But I'm not. I'm this.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't look at basketball that way.
No.
If you had a friend that's good at basketball.
Yeah.
You understand that you can learn basketball. You might not be LeBron James, but you can learn.
Yeah.
A lot of other physical.
And then you practice. Wait,
things.
So can we like double down on the sports analogies
Please,
for a
yes,
second?
yes,
So
yes.
I think I have like 3 sports analogies. Now, I know nothing about sports, but I
I'm bare
really
minimum.
like sports analogies.
Yep.
Okay, so let's try. So the first, the reason why I'm so like happy that you connected the two is people skills should be like sports.
Yes.
So first is 1, you should only get good at the stuff that you're naturally have an already natural inclination for.
Yep.
So I think the example I give in the book is like, if you're 5'2", you should not try to go for to be a basketball player.
Yep.
Like, yes, you could do it, but it's going to be so much harder for you. You'd be much better off being a jockey.
Yep.
Right? Like, pick something you're already good at. So for example, if you're naturally an introvert, don't say, you know what, I want to make my career being like a professional party promoter.
Yeah.
You can learn it, but like,
Why?
Why go there? You know, like maybe be a wedding planner that you have an assistant who can be on site. You know, like take it a step back. So first is like set yourself up for a sport or a people skills goal that actually you have a natural inclination for. Second, athletes warm up. Athletes practice. And you know what happens during practice games? At least I think from like athletes that I saw in high school because they were the cool kids. Like practice games didn't really matter, right? Like you kind of kept score, but it wasn't like a part of the rankings. You should have the same thing. You should have practice games where it doesn't really matter. I highly recommend, there's a website called meetup.com. Sign up for a meetup that has nothing to do with what you do. Nothing to do with what you do. Ideally, it's like something that you're a hobbyist in. Like, for example, I practice, this is so embarrassing. Are you ready for this? I practiced my people skills originally going to a meetup about vampire fiction.
Are you kind of like lightly into vampire fiction?
I used to be.
Okay.
Sort of used to be kind of used to be really into vampire fiction. And like I just was reading all those books. My original screen name, so embarrassing, was VVP Vampire. Like even in like 6th grade. I was gothic for like a minute. A hot minute, a horrible minute, my parents would say. So I would go to these like fiction clubs and I could be so extroverted talking about these vampire novels. So go join like a woodworking or like a basket weaving meetup because it doesn't matter.
It's so interesting. It's kind of like how you can be so extroverted if you're like in costume. You know, have you ever noticed that?
Hence why slutty Halloween costumes have always made babies.
Every time.
I think like 10 months later is like the peak birth time in hospitals. I know.
Because you're just a different person. That's really cool. Like if you go into this different world, the stakes aren't as high. Because you're like, whatever. All the vampire dorks think I'm weird. Who cares?
Exactly.
Like, go back to my own world.
I was like, I am very charismatic comparatively.
That's so good. So my point was like, it's a shame that we don't look at those things, or a lot of times we don't look at those things as muscles that you can strengthen, skills that you can get better at, and the outcomes are so rewarding because it's a lot of the like foundation of your life. You know what I mean? But I think that I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember what my original question was connected to that, but that's what I think is so cool about it is just the fact that you can get out there, you can learn, you can have a bad day and say, okay,
bad
things
practice.
Didn't go so
just
well
bad
at that.
Practice.
Exactly. So things didn't go so well there. Here's how to fix it next time. But you do make noticeable progress and end up in a totally different place. I think that's so fascinating to me.
And the other metaphor I give for all of my non-athletes listening who are like, please stop with the sports analogy. Here's my other analogy that I like to give. I do this at the end of almost every presentation. So I show a picture of my baby trying to eat for the first time. I have a 13-month-old and she is like desperately trying to learn how to use a spoon for herself. And like, it's horribly messy. I mean, like food all over her face, all over her hair. I put the picture up and I say, look, I can guarantee that you are today an expert at eating. Like I know that you are an exceptional eater. You can eat soup, you can cut your own chicken, like you are very good at eating. But I can guarantee you that when you first started, it was really messy. You missed your mouth a lot, you didn't know how to use a fork. It's kind of the same way. It's going to be messy in the beginning. I'm going to teach you my 10 favorite conversation starters and you're going to try them. And sometimes it's going to go really well. And sometimes it's going to be like, it's not going to go well. Like if anyone promises perfect people skills, it doesn't work. It's because perfect doesn't exist. So I also think that it's a skill in the sense of like, it has to be messy first. What's that famous fact? Like Michael Jordan has missed 1,000 shots. It's cool the same. Like you're going to have bad conversations. I still have awkward conversations and I teach conversation for a living.
What about conversation starters? You have a kind of a list of some examples in the book, but can you give me like just a couple examples of what that means and what a lot of times people say versus what maybe they could try on that might be a little bit better? So
I have two kind of general tips to keep in mind for conversation. The first one is that you want to make sure that you're not keeping people on autopilot. So the biggest killer of conversation is actually not awkwardness. Awkwardness is a symptom. The biggest killer of conversation is the other A word, which is autopilot. So what happens is you get into a call or you're at a networking event, you're on a date, and you're like, so how are you? Day going well? Great. So what do you do? Where are you from? And then you're on total autopilot, right? Like the brain is dead. That's what leads to awkward silences. That's what leads to bad conversations. Yeah. That's what leads to like, what are we talking about here? Yeah. So your biggest goal in conversation is actually to try to disengage someone's autopilot. Yeah. And that's very easy to do. The key is hovering the line. There's a very, very thin line, like razor edge line between uncomfortable and awake. Yeah. So you don't want to open a conversation by saying, so what's been the worst part of your year? Yeah. You're like, yeah, that's disengaging autopilot, but like it's way too deep for a bar. Yep. Right? Yep. You just went into discomfort. Yep. But what you do want to do is think, okay, what would I normally ask on autopilot? Okay, maybe it would be, how's it going? Yep. Right? It's a really easy one. What's a slightly different way that I can phrase that to still be comfortable, but have their brain be awake? So for me, that might be working on anything exciting recently. Yeah. That's exactly what we did upstairs in your office. Yeah. So we were in your office. We'd never met before. Yeah. We had a nice little banter about being in LA, and there was a little bit of a pause. But I knew that we had about a 3-minute walk to the elevator and up, right? And so I had a choice to either be like, so how's it going? Yeah. Right? Yeah. I had a choice. Yeah. But instead I said, working on anything exciting right now. Yeah. And then you told me about one of your exciting projects.
Yeah, so
and
you're
that
a
carried
pro.
us.
I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
And I should have known to look out for the signs.
And that carried us all the way to these chairs. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so that question didn't make you uncomfortable. You didn't even notice it.
Didn't notice it.
But if I had asked you, how's it going? I promise you would have been like, oh, it's good, busy, but good.
Yeah. That would have been pretty much exactly my answer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always the answer.
Damn it.
So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
A little bit different, but still comfortable. And the second thing is, if you're ever in doubt, context cues work really well. So context cues are comfortable because you can see the object or item. What I mean by this is anytime you ask something about something that's not here or hasn't been talked about, it's a little uncomfortable. Like, for example, if we aren't talking about vacations, it's a little awkward for me to be like, so got any vacations coming up? Yeah. Like, you'll go with me on it. You'll be like, yeah, but you probably in your head would be like, that's kind of random. Yeah. You can do it, but it if we're not talking about it at all, it's a little hard. Yep. So what I'd rather have you do is think about like, what's the context here? So for example, that could be anything that you see. So it could be something you've previously talked about, or how's the wine? How's that cocktail? Ooh, those empanadas look good. Have you been here before? What a cool venue. Do you know the host? Yeah. All those are things that we can see, and therefore they become more comfortable. Yeah. So just look around you and be like, is there anything I can ask about here, right? Like, in the pickup artist community, it's like asking about any item that someone's wearing, right? Yeah. In my community, it's like looking around the room and being like, wow, what a cool venue. Or like, where'd you get that mic? It looks really good, right? Any of those would work as well. Yeah, yeah. So context cues are really the other secret ingredient to having a conversation.
Yeah. Has this stuff just gotten like second nature to you now?
Yeah. I think
I'm sure you have awkward moments, but does it just feel like
muscle memory?
It's just what you do.
It feels like muscle memory. Yeah. So there's a book I read. Who was it? I think it was actually about elite performers. Might have even been called Elite Performers. I can try to send it to you. Yeah. And basically he talked about how when pro tennis players think about their serve, they mess it up. Yeah. Like the moment they toss the ball into the air and they're like elbow up, wrist back, flexibility, strength, bicep, jump, the serve is out. Yeah. But when they don't think about it, it goes. I think now, and when you've really done this work for a long time, when you've done all the courses and all the books and you've practiced those different levels, email, text, chat, in person, you get muscle memory. Yeah. And actually, the more you overthink it, the worse it is. Like when I'm around VIPs that really make me nervous, that's when I mess up the most.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. See, another sports reference. It's literally like I know you're just rifling them off.
With my sports references.
But that's why I think it's so important, because for some reason, I'm being repetitive here, but we just put these things in different categories, and we look at physical or those sports as you can get better. We look at this as a label that you just are forever.
Can I tell you one other thing about sports? Okay, so this is actually a conversation tip that my dad taught me. So my dad said to me, he sat me down when I was a senior in high school, and he said, okay. I went to an all-girls school, by the way. That's a sidebar. He goes, okay, Vanessa, you're going to go to college. It's co-ed. You're going to meet boys. They're going to talk to you about football. So here's what you're going to do. You should know 1 or 2 good lines about every major topic that comes up in conversation, and that will just get you by. Yeah. So he taught me the line, which I still say to this day.
This is amazing.
You're in a conversation. and like it's a bunch of bros, and they're like football, 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 and like I'm like don't know what they're talking about, I don't know what they're talking about, and like it turns to me, and here's what I say. But nothing like the 49ers in that Jerry Rice era, am I right?
Oh man, that's so like niche too.
But like every time, the whole group goes, yeah, man. Yeah, Jerry
and they
Rice.
just take it.
And they just take it and it's gone. And I'm like, boom.
That's so good. How many times have you used that? Like over 10?
Almost 100 probably.
That's amazing.
And like I do it like on airplanes, taxis, like whenever it comes up. And I have a line that's for basketball too. I don't even know what this means, but it goes like this. Let's say something about basketball.
Man, basketball, so sick.
I know. The best offense is the best defense.
Oh, God, you're so awesome. You want to be best friends.
Right? It's the best offense is the best defense.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? I don't know, but people always respond to it positively.
Yeah, that's dead on. He gave you good ones.
I will say it just like that. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, Lakers, what? Like, I don't know. And people always respond to it well. Now, here's the funny part of that is I'm always authentic with it. So if someone asks me a follow-up question to that, I will be like, I don't know. My dad just told me to say that when people talk about football. And it always brings up a laugh.
Yeah.
So here's my advice for listeners. If there's conversation that comes up around a certain topic in your office, like all the time, a reality TV show, something you just don't know about, you're not comfortable with it, I would highly recommend. What happens is you get into on a date or in an office colleague conversation, and everyone brings up this topic you know nothing about. This happened to me all the time with sports. Yeah. Someone's like, let's say it's The Bachelor, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh God, I don't watch those reality television shows. But here they go, all the ladies in the office talking about The Bachelor. And you're just sitting there awkwardly silent. It becomes awkward because they feel that you are not contributing and they feel bad for you. Yeah. And that's what you don't want. Or you become a dream killer. So a dream killer in conversation is someone who's like, I hate that reality TV.
Yeah.
And then you make everyone else feel bad. Yeah. So what you're better off doing is ask someone in the know, be like, hey, like all you ladies always talk about The Bachelor. Yeah. I don't know what I'm talking about. What's like something I can contribute that would be helpful? Yeah. And then just make that your contribution. And it will become a running joke and everyone will love it. And it looks like you're trying.
And if you get called out on it, say your friend gave it to you.
Yes. Be like Vanessa Van Edwards is this expert on a podcast. And she told me to just say a line that's really interesting. And did it work?
Yeah. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, we love you.
You just become hilarious.
Yeah. That's the other thing. You talk in the book about how important, we know it's important, but how important confidence is. Yeah. And that like it's more important in some cases, it sounds like in most, beyond actual skill set and history and all of these different things. Oh
no. I mean, yeah, but like I don't want to get into that because then we get into the Dr. Fox effect.
What's
that?
The
Dr. Fox effect?
No.
Search the Dr. Fox effects on YouTube. So the Dr. Fox effect is a phenomenon that was created by these researchers. These researchers had this exact idea, that it actually has nothing to do with your skills. It has everything to do with your confidence. And I think at the time they were looking at politics, which is funny because this is from like the 60s. They were saying like the most charismatic politician always wins. That's it. It's nothing to do with skills.
Funny how that works.
And they decided to test it. And so they hired an actor who they named Dr. Fox.
They named Donald Trump.
They hired an actor named Dr. Fox, and they had him give a mathematics lecture at a university to mathematics professors, okay? These were a whole bunch of mathematics professors. They didn't give him any training on mathematics. They gave him 17 mathematic terms and said, just give a speech. And you can actually watch the original video. It's black and white. It's on YouTube. And he gives like the most dynamic presentation on nonsense. I mean, literally, it's like this. It's like the 50s, like white male voice, Yeah. Well, in the algebraic equation, what we're talking about here is something that's very deeply enticing to our group of people. And the formula that we're looking at here, like that, right? Yeah. And they all gave him like off the chart scores, even though he talked about nothing. So when you say that, it's kind of like the Dr. Fox effect, which I hate because it basically goes back to what I originally said I don't want you to do, which is fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in that loop.
No, agreed. Because what I would argue is, so Dr. Fox effect is good for a one-off thing, right? So we're not encouraging it. once again, it's just funny, and I'm going to stay away from the jokes, but it's funny how it correlates to the current political issues where no experience, but very charismatic can get you very far.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're telling anyone to go do that because eventually you get caught, right? Eventually time runs out.
I guess that's true. If you need to make it through a first impression, sure, charisma's going to help you.
Yeah.
But like, know your stuff.
Yeah, that's why I think the important lesson is work this stuff out, become confident. Because it doesn't matter if the goal isn't to act like you don't have any vulnerabilities or you don't make mistakes.
Right.
It's to be confident in your mistakes.
Right.
And I think that's the important lesson. But it's just interesting when you really look at the fact that, like it or not, good or bad, people do value confidence over a lot of other things. Well,
here's why. It's because it is contagious.
Yeah.
Fear is contagious, so is confidence.
Yeah.
So if there is a confident person, this is why influencers work, right? Like typically the most popular influencers are total narcissists. Yeah. They have ultimate confidence. And what happens is people want that kind of confidence, even just a drop of it.
Yeah.
So if you're around confident people, it's more likely that you also will be confident.
Yeah.
And so if you work on your own confidence, you're not only doing it to be taken seriously, you're also doing it for the benefit of others.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I walk on stage confident in my material, confident in my presentation skills, confident in my people skills, I'm also then going to enable the audience to also feel more confident, which isn't that the point of me being on stage in the first place.
Yeah, and no matter if you go on stage and you have all the facts in the world and the best material, but you look nervous, no one gives a shite.
Exactly. The only way this is different is if that is part of your brand.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many entrepreneurs you have who listen, but your brand words are very important for how you want to come across. I'll give you a really specific example. So good friend of mine, Michelle Poehler, she has an incredible brand. It's called Hello Fears. She conquered 100 fears in 100 days and documented it all on YouTube.
She did, personally.
She did.
Sheesh.
Like everything from skydiving to getting bikini wax to giving a TED Talk. She did it all in 100 days.
100 days?
Yeah.
Back to back?
Yeah.
Or at least that's how it appeared.
I think yes.
That's impressive.
Yes. And she's amazing. Her brand is about fear. Her brand is about being nervous.
Yeah.
And so I use her as an example in some of my courses where like her fear actually works for her.
Yeah.
Like if you watch her videos, she doesn't hide her fear. She's very nervous. You watch the beginning of her TED Talk, she like tiptoes onto stage.
Yeah.
You know what? It worked.
Yeah.
It worked because it was authentic.
Yeah.
Right? So like her greatest fear, her greatest vulnerability was her fear.
Yeah.
She used that. It works for her. And now she has built a business inspiring people to conquer their fears. Yeah. And she says, I have not conquered fear. I am still very fearful, but I'm less fearful than before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's big. Can you tell me about gremlins?
Yeah.
What are they? What do I gain by spotting them? What do I do with them?
So gremlins are these horrible little thoughts that creep in and your confidence.
Yep.
Right? So oftentimes they are triggered by a fear of some kind. And the problem is our gremlins cause us to have a negative reaction. So for example, if I have a fear of being forgotten, being not memorable, I have a gremlin that says, you're not memorable. You're not worth remembering. Yeah. And that acts out as being overtly dramatic, right? Or a drama queen or the center of attention. Right? But that's actually not one of my gremlins. One of my gremlins is I'm afraid of being awkward. And then my gremlin says, you're so awkward, you don't belong here. And then what happens is I shut down and I become even less charismatic and then I become even more awkward.
Yeah.
And so what's important to think about is in that original exercise we talked about, where I was like, what are the last 5 interactions that you had that were bad? If you can, think about the gremlins that caused those behaviors. Yeah. So if you had a bad interaction where you were stumbling or you were mean or you were critical or you were negging or whatever it was and it did not go well, think about what was the gremlin, the internal thought that caused you to do that.
Yeah.
That's when you begin to get into the source.
And then what do you do when I find that little sneaky little gremlin?
Call it out.
Yeah.
Right? Gremlins love to hide.
Yeah, because it seems like this vicious circle where like if you, like you said, like your fear is being awkward, so you don't say a lot, which makes the situation awkward, which now proves to yourself you are indeed awkward.
And that is exactly how social awkwardness works.
Yeah. So what did you do like for that, for instance? How did you break out of that cycle?
So the only way that I could do it is to shine light on it. So gremlins cannot live in light.
Yeah.
Right? They only live in dark. They live in dark corners, closets. They love closets, right? So like you just got to come out of the closet. Like you just got to like open the door in that closet, right? So for example, I found when I was doing a very big deep dive into this part of my work, and I think that when I look at like my work, I started with conversation, and then I went into micro expressions, and then I went into body language, and then I went into like more the verbal relationship tactics. So there were phases of my career. So when I went into this phase of my career around awkwardness and gremlins, which came a little bit later, actually, when I was already teaching a lot of body language, I realized that I was the most awkward when I felt like I was going to be awkward. Like if I thought I was going to be awkward, it was almost 100% sure that I was going to be. And there's a story I tell in my book of I went to a wedding and the rehearsal dinner was a karaoke party. I do not do well in karaoke. Like I actually think it's one of the most awkward, horrible, torturous things on the planet. Like I think every karaoke bar should just like poof, like disappear. That's how I felt about karaoke. Okay. So we get the invitation and they're like, and rehearsal dinner, karaoke. And I was like, no. Like, I was like, great. And I was in the bridal party. So like I had to go. And this party mattered to me because it was a lot of old friends. There was some VIPs there. And so I was like, oh, I have to make a good first impression, which is like the hardest thing when you want to make a good first impression. And I was like, I'm going to be so awkward. And I was at the karaoke party and everyone was doing a song because it was a small rehearsal dinner. And I was like, if I don't do a song right now, I'm going to be the odd one out. And what was interesting is in that exact moment, I felt like the odd one out. So I knew that my action was the exact thing that could cause my greatest fear, which is to be the odd one out. And like a like kind of older woman who was there at the party, who was like killing it. She was like doing all kinds of songs and did not have that good of a voice, was like, karaoke is not about the singing. And it like in my mind, I was like, oh my God, it's what my professor said to me. This paper is not about the writing. She's like, the best karaoke is it's about the performance. It's not about the singing. And I thought, it's not about the writing. It's about the people skills. And so I picked a song that I thought could give me a lot of just fun on stage, which was The Real Slim Shady by Eminem.
Great choice.
I have no business rapping.
That's what makes it even better.
I have no business trying the worm on stage in front of everyone in a dress.
But you did both.
I have no business waving my hand in the air like I'm a cool person. Not at all. But it was a song that I could just play to. You didn't even have to sing that song, right? And it worked. And it worked, and like it killed, and like everyone afterwards was like, "What? Like we didn't know you could do karaoke?" And I'm like, "Neither did I." And so I say that because like I had to shine light on it. And so whatever that means for your gremlin is like bring it out. It cannot live in light.
Yeah, that's good. I love that concept because I think that it's once again it's if we say like, "Oh, just don't be awkward," or just what it's like the one-page book. Just don't be awkward.
Be yourself.
Like
that's when you hear.
Exactly.
That's the poor man's social skills. When someone's like, just be yourself, or like even just be authentic, which is like, what? Like, what do I do with that?
That's my problem. Is that doesn't address the gremlin behind it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's very fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
If you have that problem.
Exactly.
Can you, this question might be unanswerable, but can you?
Oh, thanks. Cool.
Welcome to Short Story Long.
Yeah, cool.
If you had to guess the amount of, presidents, people that we look up to as great leaders that have taken some sort of this training or guidance.
100.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And maybe, I'll say 100% in the last 100 years.
Fair.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is actually because of Nixon's memoir.
Yeah.
So Nixon had this very interesting point in history. For any body language nerds out there, you know this story really well. Nixon-Kennedy was the first televised presidential debate.
Yeah.
And it was a very unique point in history because you had a percent of the population that was listening to it on the radio and a percent of the population that was watching it on television.
Yep.
And everyone who watched it was sure that Kennedy won. And everyone who listened to it was sure that Nixon won. And it was the first time in U.S. history where there was a discrepancy between who won the debate.
That's interesting.
And that is because of body language and charisma.
Yeah.
Nixon, some interesting background on this debate, Nixon had actually been in the hospital from a knee injury. So he was in pain, he was sweating, and he was actually, I know many people are listening to this, some people are watching. He was sitting with his leg back, almost in like a runner's stance, because I think that his knee hurt him. Well, if you sit like this is called the runner stance in body language. It's like a position of readiness. It means you want to flee or go. This is not confident or charismatic. If I were to sit like this the whole time, you'd be like, is she going somewhere? Is she nervous? And so I think that all those body language cues, he also made the quintessential mistake. I highly recommend Google search this. You can watch the original debate on YouTube. In the very beginning of the debate, Nixon looks over at the moderator as he's talking. It's a sign of respect. The problem is it looked like he was looking over at Kennedy. And so a gaze cue in body language is very important. We look where other people look. Like, for example, if I look up at the ceiling, it's very hard for you to not look up at the ceiling. Right? Like, everything in your body is like, what is up there? And we're very hardwired to do that. So if Nixon is looking over at Kennedy, it tells the audience, don't look at me. I'm a schmo. Look over at Kennedy. But actually, I think he was looking over at the moderator. So in his memoir, he said that he thinks his body language during that debate is what cost him the entire election. And so I think that you not only couldn't win if you didn't have that kind of training, but also very quickly people learned you had to have that kind of training. Media training is, everyone gets it.
That's good to know. It's just, that's what I was hoping your answer would be, or I was hoping it'd be at least above 50.
Oh, yeah.
But once again, I think it just continues to break down that wall of, we look at these people and we think they just have a gift. And
everyone thinks that.
Yeah.
I
and
think
we're different and,
the percent of the population who's actually that naturally gifted where they could go on television and do a presidential debate or make a speech that the entire United States would be captivated by is infinitesimal.
You know what I used to do? You just reminded me that I used to do that was really embarrassing was when I was standing and talking to someone, I would, for some reason, just out of awkwardness, I would look beyond them. I don't know why, right? And I would and so what would always happen is the person would do what you just did.
No!
Because they would go, and I'd be like, shit. And it's so funny that when you just pointed out that where you look, people want to look.
Well, okay, wait, for listeners, so like you were looking at me and then you looked off to my left shoulder and then I looked past my left shoulder like, what is he looking at?
Yes, like as if someone's running up behind you. Like, people are like, what the fuck, who's in the room?
That's because of the gaze cue.
Yeah.
Because people assume that there's something important happening back there. That's why, by the way, when you're at a networking event or a speed dating event or a nightclub or a bar and you're like overhead gazing, you're like, is there anyone hotter here? Like, is there anyone better here?
Yeah.
It's like the worst thing you can do because you're like you're activating someone else's like gaze away reflex of like what else is happening.
Yeah.
So like if you're gonna have a conversation, like have the conversation. If you're not, then sit on the side and people watch.
Yeah, I'm so guilty of some of these things.
I'm sorry.
I got work to do. I want to end with a big question too.
Okay.
And for the listener, I want to say, like, we could literally talk for, 5 hours because I didn't even get into, I have a list of all my highlights from the book and I literally talked about probably 4 of them.
What?
Because I had all these notes of like, what do your hands mean? What do I do with my hands? How long do I make eye contact? Like there are very, very
just go read
practical.
The book.
Yeah, exactly. Just read the book because I want the listener to know if this even slightly interests you. There are very actionable details of how to put this stuff into action.
Big question. You promised.
The big question is this. We all, from a very young age, and you just used it about the high school football players, we all throw around the word popular. Everyone wants to be popular. And I think a lot of the people that say they hate the popular kids secretly wish they were the popular kids.
Of course.
Every human has this urge to be popular. What makes someone popular?
Yes.
What is it really?
I actually think that that's the question that drove my work in the beginning, right? Because, of course, my first bad social interactions were when the popular kids were too popular for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that was the first time I ever questioned, how can I be popular?
Yeah.
What makes them popular? So what's really interesting is my hypothesis about this, and I wonder what yours was. Yeah. My hypothesis about this was like, oh, it's the prettiest girls. It's the most athletic guys. It's maybe the smartest people. Yeah. Did you?
I'm going to be honest. I always thought about it as those people have a gift that I don't.
Okay. So like
whether it's
some kind of aptitude that you don't have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether it's looks, because we all know the like pretty or handsome awkward person that blows it all, right? It's like, man, you're so pretty,
I don't
but
know
you
that
are
person,
so
actually.
awkward, right?
All the pretty people I know are pretty charismatic.
Everyone, you've never met like a really pretty
I did.
person
Genevieve.
with like
I
really
did.
bad posture or whatever. And you're just like, oh, you should
Yeah.
be like you are, like you're
That's
good looking.
true. That's true.
Okay.
I did. Yeah.
So my point is, I couldn't pin it on any one thing. I just always,
It's like,
it was just like, oh, you have something.
you have that it.
I know,
So I always thought it was like the ists,
Yep.
the smartest, the funniest, the prettiest, the most athletic,
Yeah,
the
that one.
ists,
Yeah,
right?
Yep.
And then I read the study by Van Sloan, and what he did is, I think he's probably like me, where he's like a recovering awkward person. And he was like, why?
Yeah.
He's an academic, and he studied thousands of high school kids,
Yep.
literally trying to figure out what makes the popular kids popular. He
Yeah.
had all these hypotheses. And he looked at a lot of variables, GPA, athleticism, ranked for looks. I mean, he did all of it. And he found that there was one single variable that predicted the popular kids.
Ooh, that's exactly what I was hoping for. What is it?
The popular kids of all the kids in their school liked the most other people.
Wow.
In other words, to be liked, you actually have to like the most people.
And that's a hard one to fake.
That's a really hard one to fake. Yeah. And what's really interesting about this is he breaks it down in the study where basically, if you want to be popular, you go into the first day of high school, or you go into the first day of your job, or you go into a conference, or you go into a networking event, and you think, how can I like everyone in this room?
Yeah.
Not, how can everyone in this room like me?
Yeah, damn it.
And so...
That's so true, you know? Because like, even if you're on step one of like this stuff, you're like, all right, there's only 300 people here, and I can get every one of them to like me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you go in and you're like, I need to find a way to like every single person in here.
Yeah.
So what do you do more of? And he literally said when these kids walk down the hallway, they are not smiled at more. They smile more.
Yeah.
They are not nodded at more. They nod more. So in other words, when kids would walk through the hallway, they were like, oh, like he's not going to like me. But then he was like, hey. And you're like, oh, hey.
Yeah.
So it's actually being the liker. Like that's how you do it. And that is easy. I think that's easier than walking into a room and saying, how do I become likable? Because it means that every conversation you have, and I have a whole lot of strategies about this, but the most basic one is, what questions can I ask to find out everything I like about this person?
Yeah.
That's it.
And what I love so much is it puts it in your control.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
It's
Like I would hate to read it and be like,
control.
well, shit. I just read this whole study and I don't have any of that.
Right. Or like, it's like, you know, the girl with the biggest boobs. That's it.
Yeah,
That was
you're
the
like, well,
answer.
okay.
All right. Done.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it puts it all in your power.
Yeah. In your power. And like, talk about being authentic. You can't fake a way to liking someone. You actually have to like them. Right? You actually have to ask questions to find the similarities and find the stories and find the mutually beneficial TV shows or find the mutual beneficial contacts.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. I think those moments where you were at dinner with friends and you found yourself like having fun.
Yeah.
What was happening was you were actually beginning to like those people.
Yeah.
Not that they liked you, that you liked them.
Yeah. Because it's just when you're able to get out of your own, the go-to response is, ooh, I'm awkward. Oh, they don't. Oh, that was uncomfortable. They don't like me. They don't even need me here. What am I even adding to this? And like, you know, trying to dig out of that. Like you're just attacked by gremlins.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
As opposed to like, how do I just genuinely enjoy these people and this thing?
Yeah. A kind of mental trick, if you want something more specific that I give myself is, if I had pretend that you have to introduce someone on stage, what would you have to ask them to give them a raving bio?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so then you're going to get beyond like, what do? You're going to be like, what are your proudest accomplishments? You're not going to ask that, but you're going to say, are you working on anything exciting recently? Yeah. You know, like, have you been working on like any big projects?
Yep.
Tell me about your family, because you're gathering facts to introduce someone.
Yeah, I accidentally learned a lot of those skills from doing this podcast. Once again, that was not the plan, and I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was until I started doing it. But now I'll be having conversations at a restaurant or whatever, and people will be like, gosh, I feel like I'm on your podcast right now. This is so awesome.
Yeah.
Because like I'm just asking questions.
Also, you have to like me.
Yeah.
Right? Like you invited me on your podcast, right?
You're right?
And so it would be weird if you brought someone on your podcast and didn't like me, because then that would be like, oh, like it's just for show.
Yeah.
So like you are asking questions because you like me, and you also want the audience to feel like they like me too, because that makes us both look good.
Yeah.
So it's like a very secret back door into, I really want to like this person. How do I make sure that they know that?
Yeah.
With questions.
Yeah, that's cool.
Everyone should host a podcast. Yay.
Literally, I tell people that. Because not only have I learned just conversation skills, but it forces me once a week to sit down with someone I respect or that's doing something cool.
Yeah.
I've made a lot of cool new friends.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't care if you live in Idaho and you are super obsessed with collecting Christmas ornaments.
Or vampire fiction.
Vampire fiction. Find your crew.
Exactly.
Gosh.
Go on that meetup.com and find them.
There you go.
Not sponsored by meetup.com.
Yeah, this episode is. Here's another deep one, and then we'll get to the final two.
Okay.
Why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you get out of all this?
You know how comedians say that they're addicted to laughs?
Yeah.
That's always resonated with me, but it wasn't quite right. Yep. I am addicted to aha moments.
Yeah.
Like, my fuel is like when you are like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, you got me a few times on
like,
this.
I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, that's my fuel. So, like, when no joke, like when I'm speaking in front of a big audience, if I cannot hear, it's not a good day for me. Yeah. And so, like, when I'm writing something, writing a script, doing a YouTube video, doing an interview, speaking, doing an office hours, all I'm thinking about is this piece of content going to give someone or have a potential to give an aha moment?
Yeah.
If not, it doesn't make it. I think that's why people like the work so much, is because that's actually the bar I'm comparing it to. Is like, if that's not going to give an aha moment, it doesn't go.
Yeah, that's good. Where do you get the most aha moments?
Research.
Yep.
I really like, and that's been our unique studies, research. Like, when I, like, all those studies I shared about the skydivers and like I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, blows my mind.
Yeah.
So those are my aha moments, like research.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, here's the final two. You can hop in a time machine. I didn't tell you this is part of the podcast, is you get to hop in a time machine.
Oh.
You can go anywhere in your own life and tell yourself anything.
Yeah.
Where do you go and what do you say?
Freshman year of college.
Okay.
Stop studying so much.
Yeah.
Do not triple major. It's really dumb. No one cares. Yeah. Your GPA doesn't matter. Socialize more. Study less. You have time for the party. Yeah. It's okay if you get less sleep.
Yeah.
I would like literally tell myself that. Like, I had so much guilt about, Emory's expensive, and I had so much guilt about, like, I have to maximize every library book. I have to go to every office hours. Like, I had so much guilt about like achieving that I didn't enjoy it. Yep. And I certainly didn't understand that socializing was actually part of the experience.
Yeah. I would say, because, I used to ask people, what do you think about college and blah, 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 but I didn't want it to seem like I was a college hater. It sounds like the most single positive thing about college that I heard was the social
And
experience.
I didn't socialize. Yeah. I literally didn't.
Did you triple major?
Yeah.
Jeez. Do you still have to?
I had to get a special form for that too. What? Why did I do that?
That's funny. It had to feel good at the time though. I'll take the double. It's like the 2 seatbelts on the plane, but the good version. Do you still have to tell yourself that advice?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Like, I go to conferences and I'm like, oh, the happy hour at 5. I just want to go to the sessions. And I'm like, no, Vanessa, the happy hour is part of this conference.
Yeah, it's true. I had the same problem there. Okay, last one. You can prescribe anything to the entire world for 30 days, and everyone has to do it. You're the world's doctor. For 30 days, they have to do it. What do you make everyone do?
When you think something nice about someone, you have to tell them. I think that the biggest enemy of awkwardness, or I should say the supporter of awkwardness, is the fact that we don't realize how many people already like us.
Yeah.
Like, our gremlins assume the worst, right? Gremlins just are horrible little negative creatures. They're like, I'm uncool. People hated what I just said. No one likes me. No one thinks about me. They notice my zit, whatever it is. Yeah. People actually don't. People actually often like you, or at least they're neutral. Yeah. And so if we heard the positive comments people say about us, boy, it would make us feel so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and also, by the way, the act of giving a compliment is also a feel-good moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was incredible. Like I said, I can't stress enough how much, and this is the first time I've ever said this on this podcast, just so you know, this isn't an ad. I did not get into any of the real nitty-gritty details. So if any of this hit your radar or seemed interesting, check out the book, check out the TED Talk, is there a website where people can go?
Yeah, scienceofpeople.com. It's where all the articles, all the videos, all the articles.
There you go.
Everything's there.
Go there, check it out. You'll love it. Change your life, guys. Turn
Fight
this
your
podcast
gremlins.
off and go fight those damn gremlins.
Get them in the light. Gremlins can't live in light.
Go like some people.
That's it.
Thank you. Bingo. Guys, if you like that and you want to see more like it, as well as vlogs, other web series, and all the random stuff that I'm doing here on YouTube, don't forget to click that subscribe button. You won't regret it. I promise.